I'm Candice Malcolm, and welcome to the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great show for you this morning. We are going to get into all of Trump's recent comments over the weekend, calling Justin Trudeau a loser. And first, we're going to get into this Ruby Dhalla situation, because from best I can tell, the fix is in. The Liberal Party has done everything in its power to try to remove obstacles for the coronation of Mark Carney. Mark Carney's the one that they want. He's the one that has been chosen. He has been selected. He comes from the World Economic Forum. He's a central banker. He's been centrally cast to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And the Liberal Party, the Liberal machine, will do everything in their power to make sure that he's Prime Minister, including apparently wielding the CBC and turning it into their personal propaganda machine. We're going to get to all of that. I'm very pleased today to be joined for the whole show by Professor Bruce Pardy. He's a legal scholar, professor of law at Queen's University, and he is always an interesting guest. So Bruce, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Candice. Pleasure to be with you.
Okay, let's get into the Ruby Dhalla situation, because we learned on Friday that she has been disqualified as leader in the race. So the Liberal Party committee voted unanimously, we're told, to disqualify the former MP from the leadership race. The committee claims to have found 10 serious violations, including breaches of party rules, potential violations of the Elections Canada Act, and a failure to disclose a non-citizen's involvement in her campaign, which they argued could amount to foreign interference. This is the best part, though, Bruce. Ruby Dhalla learned about her disqualification live on air on CBC. She was invited to do a CBC news hit, and apparently CBC got the memo before they even informed their own candidate that she had been disqualified. Here is what that looked like, folks. This is CBC, Friday, February 21st. Unbelievable. Power and Politics with David Cochrane. Let's play that clip.
Have you received official word yet from the Liberal Party on your disqualification from this race?
I haven't as of yet. It's quite interesting that I turned on news and read your headline that I was being disqualified from the race. I checked my email, my campaign team has, and as of this moment, we have not received any indication from the Liberal Party as to that type of decision.
I can't even believe, like, what kind of country do we live in, Bruce, where the state broadcaster has information about a campaign that the candidate themselves doesn't even have? They're closer cahoots in communication with the Liberal Party than the candidates. What do you make of all this?
Well, it tells you more than you want to know, doesn't it? So we think of political parties as public institutions, and we expect them to behave as though they are parts of the state. And I think that's our first mistake. They are actually not. They're more or less semi-private organizations. And it's simply because the Liberals and the Conservatives, but the Liberals, the natural governing party of Canada, are in power so often, we think of them as sort of synonymous with government, but they're not. The people on the inside, the Liberal Party, control the party, and our expectations are misplaced. This kind of event pulls back the curtain to show us all how it really works. And so when you have the candidate on CBC and CBC telling her that she's been disqualified, that's the way it really works. And the people on the inside have voted to disqualify her. Now, who knows what the actual facts are? I'm myself, I'm a little dubious that these disqualification events are real, but who knows? But the bottom line is the people inside control who gets to be the candidate, who gets to be the leader. And we have to stop insisting that our expectations are real instead of seeing things for what they actually are.
Well, I mean, you're obviously right, because this isn't democracy. This isn't a grassroots selection process. This is clearly a top-down decision. And I don't think that Ruby Dhalla was a particularly strong candidate. I don't know that she would have even stood a chance against Mark Carney, because that's where all the institutional inertia is going towards him in the leadership race. But the fact that she was a bit of an outsider, yes, she'd been an MP, but she hasn't been in the Ottawa bubble for a decade. She was talking about different kinds of issues, and I think that she did pose a unique threat. She spoke to Ruby Dhalla, joined Juno News' Cat Canada in an exclusive interview over the weekend, and she basically just said, "Look, they didn't want me to be out there because I posed a a threat to Mark Carney. Here, let's play a clip of what that looked like.
But I think that they wanted to complete the coronation of Mark Carney. They did not want to have Ruby Dhalla on that debate stage or on that ballot. And ultimately, they were denying not Ruby Dhalla, but they denied the thousands of people that were supporting me and wanted to vote for a Liberal Party that would be brought back to the center. And most importantly, a party where all the membership and the grassroots would actually have a voice.
So she said that, and even further to her point. So speaking on CBC's Power and Politics, this was on Thursday, so the day before this all happened. We had a former Liberal Party insider, I believe, a senior advisor, Stevie O'Brien, basically say the quiet part out loud. Let's play that clip.
I certainly hope that the party finds a legitimate reason to disqualify her candidacy before the debates.
Really?
I hope so. I think that, we've got a serious campaign. Canadians are looking for a serious leader. I think that's one of the reasons that Carney is doing very well. I would really hate for us to lose, as a partisan, to lose that momentum because someone's trying to turn the debates into a circus.
So that was a former chief of staff to a Liberal cabinet minister. And she basically said it. I hope we find a legitimate reason to kick her out because we don't want difficult questions and we don't want to turn it into a circus, meaning we don't want legitimate questions that could derail Mark Carney's walk into the park of being prime minister. What do you think, Bruce?
Well, I think that clip and this event shows how little they fear being exposed for how the thing actually runs. I mean, their control is so complete. Not only over the party, but over the country, that they're not concerned about how it looks, and that to me is the biggest indication of a problem. I agree with you that I don't think as a candidate she probably amounted to a very serious threat to his eventual victory. But apparently they didn't want to have a contentious conversation during the debate, which one would think that that's what a debate is for. So they're almost drunk on their own power. If a person like that is willing to say that out loud, then that has become the norm in the way that they think. They think it's okay for in a Liberal leadership race to find a reason to disqualify a candidate because of the way she will appear to the public.
Well, it's interesting. Just a couple of further pieces of context here, right? When Justin Trudeau resigned, or at least stated his intention to resign, he's still the prime minister, but on January 6th, he resigned. And he said that the Liberal Party will have a robust leadership campaign where the leader will be chosen from the grassroots. That's obviously not true. Right. He also said after Donald Trump was reelected, President Trump was reelected down in the States, he said that the American population missed out on the opportunity to elect its first female president, and was sort of looking down his nose at those Americans who didn't make the right choice and elect a Democrat. And so there's just so many layers of irony here. It's like they don't care about democracy. They don't care about women. They don't care about anything. They don't care about minorities. They're happy to kick out the people of Indian descent from the leadership race so that, we have like 3 white front runners. And that's really what the Liberal Party is all about, even though they like to say that they're all about like diversity and all these other things.
All true, but the most telling thing is that it's so transparently true, and yet it doesn't seem to matter, right? And that's not the fault of the people who are speaking. I mean, the hypocrisy is obvious, but the real problem is that it continues to work. Mm-hmm. Why is it that so many Canadians have such a short memory, so that this kind of propaganda, and that's really what it is, succeeds? You would like to think that eventually, a critical mass of people would recognize it for what it was, for what you just described it as. But apparently that doesn't seem to be so. And the same thing with the disqualification of Dhalla. It's like, it doesn't seem to matter. And so why wouldn't they continue down this path?
Well, I mean, help us understand, because we've seen the Liberals have a bounce. I don't know if it's a resurgence. I don't know if the polls are picking things up accurately, but many polls, if not almost all of the polls over the last 6 weeks have shown a huge bounce in the Liberals. Some of them show the Liberals up to being neck and neck with the Conservatives. It was just in December, before Trudeau announced his intention to resign, that it looked like Pierre Poilievre was going to walk into one of the biggest majority governments in Canadian history. And now it's like a coin flip. I don't even know that he's for sure going to win. So how is it that with a Liberal Party being so callous, so like you said, unabashedly willing to change the rules, to kick people out, to even say it out loud on CBC for the whole country to see, we're going to rig it, we're going to get our guy in, and yet Canadians are presumably, I mean, maybe the polls are wrong, and maybe it's all part of a coordinated attempt to make Canadians think that there's enthusiasm and support and love for Mark Carney. I'm not sure, but you live in Ontario. Help us understand these Ontario voters. Why is it that they'd be so willing to forgive a party like the Liberal Party?
I wish I knew. I really wish I knew. I don't know if these polls are valid or not. I don't know if they're fake or not. I really don't know. I'm surprised that there'd be such a change in such a short time. So they might be manipulated. But part of their purpose might be to lead to a further manipulation, to make people think, oh, well, now things are different, and now I'm going to rethink what I was going to do before. But it's all part of the same play, right? The powers that be have learned over a long period of time that the public can be manipulated, and they're not wrong. That's the real problem. They're not wrong that the public can be manipulated, and why particular voters in Ontario or elsewhere would be willing, after these past 9 years, to think that maybe things are not so bad after all. Couldn't begin to tell you.
You know, it reminds me of the provincial politics. You had the Dalton McGuinty government back in the early 2000s. And, they ruled with popular appeal for many years. And then all of a sudden, there was just too many scandals and too much waste. And there was this huge boondoggle with the gas power plants being canceled in the middle of the election. And so they got rid of Dalton McGuinty, and then they just put Kathleen Wynne in. And I couldn't believe that Ontario voters rewarded her with a government, but they did, because I think they saw, even though Kathleen Wynne was a minister in McGuinty's government, I think they saw there was enough change, right? It's not McGuinty anymore. It's this fresh face, this woman. She's going to be different. And even though it was just the same party, the same apparatus, the same people behind the scenes, they saw it as enough of a change and gave her another government now. To be fair, in the next election after that, Doug Ford won, and he's now set to win his third straight majority government. So I don't know that it paid off in the long run for the Liberals, but it's interesting that voters would be willing to forgive a party with a new face on the front.
It's the power of a brand, right? This is goes back to my original point. I mean, the Liberal Party has a brand, and people associate things with the brand that maybe aren't true, but that doesn't matter because it's in their head. It's like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is a brand, and the brand sells the product. The branding of the political party sells the product, even if the product stinks. And so there's real value, and the brand is essentially a private one, privately held. People think that the natural order of things in Canada is, or for that matter, in a province, Ontario, say, the natural order of things is that the Liberals or the Conservatives have to be the government, because that's the way we do things. I mean, I know there are NDP exceptions, but essentially, the voters won't entertain the possibility that a newcomer to the political arena might be a better go. This doesn't happen. And so if you are able to take control of one of these brands, then you've got a shot. If not, you're out in the political wilderness. And that's a very hard thing to shake, even if the parties themselves spend years denigrating their brand. People don't seem to notice. It's a very powerful, deeply held perception, and difficult to shake.
Well, a huge part of the Liberal Party's brand is sort of this appeal to anti-American sentiment. I think that lives strongest in the minds of Central Canadians and Laurentians, that they really define themselves as Canadians as just being not Americans and counter to the American. And the stronger that anti-American sentiment is, the better the Liberals seem to do. And so we can enter Trump into the conversation. And he was really ramping up the rhetoric over the weekend. Now, on the one hand, as a conservative that's I like Donald Trump. I like a lot of the things that he says and does in the States. I think that the Canadian Conservatives would be better picking up some of those things, not all of them, but some of them. I like Trump. I think he's hilarious, and I think he's good for the country, for the U.S. But some of the things he's doing is just not helpful to us Canadians and conservatives. And I'll give you a few examples.
Okay.
So first, we'll talk about his appearance on Fox News with Brian Kilmeade. And President Trump calls Justin Trudeau a loser, says he always has been. Let's play that clip.
We won the first game, and the second game was a great game. It could have gone either way. Justin's a loser, always has been, and he's just a guy that really doesn't. I think he's done a very bad job for Canada. He's taken it radical left. Justin's sort of a nice guy, but he's a loser.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your opinion there, President Trump. We know that President Trump doesn't have a lot of time for Justin Trudeau because when Justin Trudeau was speaking the night that they introduced the retaliatory tariffs to Trump's tariffs, Trudeau let it slip that he has been trying to get a hold of President Trump, and Trump won't take his call. Let's play that clip.
What does it tell you about your relationship with President Trump that you've been trying to get a hold of him and he hasn't been speaking with you?
I think this is a time where we've all remarked on just how active President Trump has been in engaging with a wide range of topics in his first weeks in office.
So we know that Trump doesn't like Trudeau, and those of us who don't like Trudeau either, we like this fact. It's funny, and I think that Trudeau deserves a bit of trolling and a bit of mockery that he gets. But then at the same time, it sort of fuels this liberal brand. Like the more that Trump is angry at Trudeau and takes it on Trudeau and makes these remarks, somehow the stronger the Liberal Party gets in Canada. What do you make of all this?
Well, of course, the reactionary, knee-jerk anti-Americanism has always been, or maybe I don't want to overstate it, but that has been one of the primary characteristics of the Canadian identity. We come by it honestly, too. It's in our cultural DNA, if you like. A lot of people who ended up in Canada at the time of the American Revolution came to escape the American Revolution. The Canadians were Canadian because they didn't want to be American. And let's put it another way. Over the past, let's say, 5 years or so, a lot of the Canadian chattering classes have decided that Canada is a terrible country, a settler country, an oppressive country, an evil capitalist Western country. And it seems like the only country that they think is worse is the United States. So it's hilarious to have watched them denigrate the Canadian flag, for example. And now suddenly when the Americans and Trump are trolling them, now they want to wrap themselves in the Canadian flag. It's just another piece of the hypocrisy we've been talking about. And the question is anybody noticing? Is the Canadian population noticing the hypocrisy, the inconsistencies, the shrillness of the response? And I fear that the answer is that it won't be a very large proportion of the population.
It almost feels like we're back in COVID hysteria, Bruce. It's like, remember back then when they said that you couldn't go to church, you couldn't go to like your community group. I couldn't go for a walk in the park with my kids. My kids couldn't play on the playground because somehow that was going to be dangerous for COVID. And yet you could walk into the local Loblaws or Costco or any of these big box stores and they were open for business. And it's like, help me make sense of that, right? Like, how is it not only that they can impose these ridiculous rules, but that the vast majority of Canadians will just go along with it, right? It's like the Buy Canada campaign where, I read on X, someone was recounting a story about how they were in a Costco in Ottawa about to buy something, and then they got scolded by a fellow shopper saying, you can't buy that. That's made in America. You have to buy something made in Canada. It's like, hello, you're in Costco. Like Costco is like a big American
right?
store.
Exactly.
So it's
American
like,
company.
it's like the mindset of like, you can't buy something American, but you're or all the people who say they hate Elon Musk whilst engaging on X. It's just inherently contradictory, and yet somehow it works. Somehow the Liberals have managed to use this momentum to boost themselves in the polls. I'm going to play another example. So again, this is the kind of thing that, as a Canadian conservative, I find it hilarious. But not helpful, not helpful. So President Trump was speaking at the Republicans Governors Association in Washington, D.C.,
Right.
and he said, I guess rather benevolently, that he likes the Canadian national anthem, and that when Canada becomes a 51st state, we can keep our national anthem. We can keep O Canada. Let's play that clip.
You heard the people booing the national anthem, but I think ultimately they'll be praising the national anthem. We'll have to work out some deal with it, because I do like the O Canada, right? It's a beautiful thing. I think we're going to have to keep it for the 51st state. I call him Governor Trudeau. I said, Governor Trudeau's doing a wonderful job. I think it's actually cost him his election, if you want to know the truth.
No, President Trump, it hasn't cost him the election. It's helping him. It's helping his party. Every time Trump says 51st state, it helps the Liberals.
Well, but this is a kind of moment of truth for Canada, really, right? And I know people want to focus on Trudeau and the present Liberal government, and fair enough, but this is a much bigger picture than that, right? Our main threat today, in my opinion, comes from inside, not from outside. Now, there are lots of threats from outside as well, but part of the problem is that our threats from inside are colluding with those outside threats. And so it's not just Trudeau. If you get rid of Trudeau, the problem's not solved. Carney is going to be a problem, but he's not the problem. The Conservatives, listen, I have to say this. If the Conservatives get in, that does not solve the problem. Like, I'm not partisan about this. I think we have some real serious structural, constitutional problems in this country that we are pretending do not exist. One of the things I think that a lot of COVID dissidents in Canada discovered was that the country that they thought they lived in does not actually exist. It's a figment of their imagination. And a lot of people are defending now, I think, the country they have in their imagination. That country does not exist. Our main problems are internal. It's the way the country is organized. It's the people who lead us. It's our elites. It's our chattering classes. It's the idea that we need to be managed as a country. It's in our cultural heritage. We have to rethink, I think, what this country is. And Trump, for all his trolling, and I understand what you're saying about, the political moment, but Trump has opened the door to a conversation. Now, maybe the conversation will go badly. I don't know. But it is at least now possible to speak about what Canada is and what our fortunes, where our fortunes lie, what we should do now, because this country is in a mess.
I tend to agree. I mean, I raised this on an interview I did last week with Professor David Haskell from Wilfrid Laurier, where I think Canada's at rock bottom. I can't imagine the economic situation getting any worse. I mean, when the loonie went down to 68, it's popped back up a little bit, but you have a declining dollar, you have just every single economic problem, cost of living, cost of housing, cost of groceries, cost of fuel, everything compounding from the Liberal government agenda. But then on top of that, you have this social division, not just the separatist movements, but at a local community level. Like, people don't feel safe in their homes and in their communities. And I talk to so many people who, every time I talk to people from Toronto, it's like all they're talking about is home robberies, home invasions, carjackings, and the rampant problem of illegal immigration and legal immigration. And even among immigrant communities, it has completely divided them. Like, people just don't feel safe on the streets of Toronto. And even in safe suburbs, they don't feel safe. And to me, like, Canada's just not in a good place. And I agree with Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, when he says Canada's broken. Of course it's broken. It's been broken for a long time. It really came to the surface during COVID. And now again with this hyperinflation and with crime. And if there were to be a time where Canada could fall, I mean, having this offer from Trump, it's like this would be a time where more Canadians than usual, I think, might be open to the idea of it. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I want to tie this to your recent Substack piece that you wrote last week, a declaration of independence for Alberta. Right. And so you're not from Alberta, you're not an Albertan, but you believe that Alberta's potential would be greater if they were independent or potentially part of the United States. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So as you say, I'm not from Alberta. I'm an Ontario boy, and so it's really not my place to do this. But I thought, listen, I might as well express what I would say if I was from Alberta, because I perceive that it's not just Alberta, but Alberta first and foremost really has had a raw deal in Confederation for quite a while. And I know that there are a lot of people in Alberta who feel that way, and it might not be in a majority, but there's a lot of people that I have encountered who very firmly think that their fortunes would be much better off either independent or as a part of the US of A. And this is all part of the result of the flaws in this country as they have come to be. So let's just talk about Alberta first in particular. Alberta's primary industries have been intentionally impeded over a long period of time, both by the federal government and by other provinces. So for one example, Quebec refuses to approve pipeline to move Alberta oil from where it is to the East Coast. The federal government over a period of time has done its best to undermine Alberta's constitutional jurisdiction through things like the Impact Assessment Act. And there is the bugbear of equalization. For a long time, the wealth of individual Albertans has been taxed by the federal government and then redistributed across the country. And, it's a federation, so it's cooperative. And so sometimes, we help out other places, but this has been going in one direction for a long time. So I do not blame Albertans at all, those who think that their fortunes might be better somewhere else. I completely understand where they're coming from. The thing is that a lot of these problems, I think, can be traced to our Canadian history, because there was a moment, and I alluded to it earlier, there was a moment when the Americans were deciding that they did not want to live under the thumb of the British king anymore, they would have taken us on board and said, let's all do this together. Let's be a continent. And the Canadians at the time refused. They wanted to be subjects of the king. And, maybe for them that decision made sense at the time. I can't put myself in their shoes, but nevertheless, that is the legacy of this country. And so there's a determination on the part of many Canadians, and some of them I would think don't understand why they're so committed to this, but they're committed, number one, to being not American, and number two, they're committed to being under the thumb of the crown. And I don't think that either one of those two things as a knee-jerk reaction is very helpful. I think it's important for us to take this moment, this opportunity, to rethink the decision we made in 1775 to rebuff the Americans and say, well, hold on. Let's just rethink this again. We have another choice now. We have the choice again. What would it mean to join the Americans? That's not going to happen as a country. I mean, I know Trump's been trolling us as a 51st state. I don't think there's any prospect at all of Canada as a unit becoming the 51st state. The embedded interests in our federal system, in our national system, simply will not stand for that, because their status and fortunes depend upon having this small pond. They're big fish in a small pond. The small pond has to continue. But there's no reason why an aggrieved province like Alberta couldn't step out and say, you know what, we've been mistreated, we're out. And once you had one or maybe two, my colleague Lawrence Solomon has suggested this, that maybe two at a time might be appropriate, and he's suggesting Alberta and Newfoundland. Newfoundland is the most recent entry to Confederation. It for a time looked like it wanted to join the United States. There's still some rumblings of that around, I understand, in Newfoundland. Alberta and Newfoundland together, once you had one or two, even if it wasn't finished yet, even if they started on the path, that might start a cascade, a domino effect. And suddenly we would be in a different territory in terms of talking about what we ought to do as a country. And that's a conversation I think we have to have.
And then, I mean, if we were to play out this hypothetical scenario where Alberta and Newfoundland said, okay, we probably would have a better go at things if we were part of the U.S. Lower cost of living, more purchasing power, higher standard of living, all these things that we've talked about so much on this show. I mean, what would happen to the rest of Canada at that point?
Well, I would think that the rest of Canada, maybe province by province or region by region, would then consider whether or not it wanted to undergo the same process. So I would imagine, let's just hypothetically, we're blue skying here, but let's just imagine. Let's say Alberta and Newfoundland were either accepted as states or on the way to becoming states. I would have thought that the people in Saskatchewan, for example, would immediately say, well, us too. Don't leave us behind. We want to join, and so on. I suspect, this is just a guess, but I suspect that Ontario and Quebec would be the holdouts, because they have the most to lose, because that's where the power base in Canada is. All the Laurentians live there. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Quebec might decide that finally it does want to be an independent country. I don't know. Ontario might be the last man standing, to its detriment. But so be it. A lot of Ontarians that don't want to be the last man standing might move elsewhere so that they can join the people who are moving off. But who knows? I mean, there's so many different scenarios. And maybe Alberta would decide to be independent and not part of the United States. Who knows? The point is that the status quo has proven to be not very good. And we now have choices in front of us that we need to talk about in a way that's not the knee-jerk reaction that we're having right now.
It's so interesting because, I mean, when you hear that, I think the whole conversation was designed to annoy Canadians, and specifically the election elites. Like, that's why I held out for a long time that I did think Trump was joking. I didn't think that he was serious. I thought that it was, if you read The Art of the Deal, he says, like, throw out the most, to start a negotiation, throw out the most outrageous demands. And then, by the time you get back to what you want, it sounds much more reasonable. And it seemed like trolling. It seemed like he was just kind of putting it out there. But then, like I said, we're at this low point in Canadian history in just so many ways. And it's like, well, I mean, some of the things that Trump says is accurate. Like, Canada doesn't have a real military. We don't hold our own weight. We don't really protect our Arctic. And if you look at it from like the perspective of, for instance, a journalist, Sam Cooper, who's done deep dive investigations.
Yeah, great work. Yeah.
Chinese infiltration into so many different aspects of our society. It's not just political interference, which the Liberal government's happy to just sweep under the rug, but it's also like our financial institutions and the police stations. And there's just, corporate espionage. There's just deep levels of Chinese integration. And you think, in what way is Canada a sovereign state today? We can't even protect ourselves from these nefarious foreign actors. I mean, it's not even to get into different sort of Islamist operations that happen in Canada, or the Iranians that have these cultural community centers there to like influence the culture. Like, we don't have this sovereign, independent country. We have all of these influences that we can't even protect ourselves against. So if you look down the road, like 25, 50 years, would you rather be under China's influence, or would you rather be part of America? I think even the most anti-American, loyalists and the historic loyalists in Canada would still probably say that they would rather be under the American influence than the Chinese. I think, although given the fact that the Liberals have allowed so much of this, maybe they would prefer the Chinese. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of Canadians don't appreciate one of the reasons why the Americans are now interested in acquiring Canada, why Trump is trolling us like this. It's because we have become a threat to them, because we have allowed this infiltration that you're referring to. I mean, we have not been a serious country for quite a while, and we've assumed a kind of Canadian manifest destiny that we are due certain things. But here's the hypocrisy or the irony of Canada. At the same time that we carry our anti-Americanism on our shoulders, we live under their umbrella. We benefit from economic integration with them. We depend upon them for military protection. We've assumed for forever, or at least since World War II, that if anybody attacked us, the Americans would defend us. If not for our benefit, then certainly for theirs. And as long as we were a benign, a secure source of, resources and nice people, everything as far as the Americans were concerned, everything was fine. But we have allowed our country to be influenced in very bad ways. And we've gone downhill. What you say about the military is correct. We couldn't defend our own borders if we tried. And there are foreign powers now knocking on the Americans' door because of us. So we are now a threat, and they're not going to put up with that. So we either have to fix ourselves, which would be a very difficult thing to do because of all of the internal problems, or the Americans are going to come in and fix it for us.
I want to bring in something that Ben Shapiro, so Daily Wire co-founder and conservative, probably the most famous conservative pundit in the States, he wrote the following on Facebook this morning. He wrote, "I still don't understand why we're levying 25% tariffs on Canada. I've got to be honest with you. I don't understand that one. I get it on Mexico. I get it on China. In fact, I think we should have much higher tariff on China because China is an actual geopolitical enemy, but I don't understand exactly what we're trying to pry out of the Canadians." So Bruce, tell me, what is it that Ben Shapiro doesn't understand?
Well, I don't know. Just from that passage, he might not understand the degree to which China has, and not just China, other powers as well, have infiltrated and influenced what's going on in Canada. And Sam Cooper knows an awful lot more about this than I do. But it's not just fentanyl; it's organized crime, it's political interference. All of these things have been alleged. I've certainly heard credible accounts that they're real. And so the 25% tariff, I mean, who knows? It's Trump, right? And one of Trump's strengths is that he's unpredictable. And he does throw things out to rattle you. And it's very effective. I mean, the Canadians are rattled. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what his end game is, but to try and predict what he's going to do is very difficult and not the point. The point is that you and I here are now talking about this, along with a whole lot of other people in this country. And that's a good thing. And that's probably what they want. They want as many Canadians, I think, as possible to understand we have some problems, and the Americans have noticed. And they're not going to allow us to become a threat to them. So if you don't want interference from the Americans, then get rid of the interference from other places.
I completely agree with you. It's interesting. I want to play in this other clip because Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, was on with CBS journalist Catherine Hedgebridge over the weekend, former CBS journalist. And he basically said that this whole 51st state thing came from Justin Trudeau, that it was right. Justin Trudeau's comments at a dinner at Mar-a-Lago that basically started it all. Let's play that clip.
In a hot mic moment, Canada's Prime Minister said that absorbing Canada is a real thing. Is it a real thing?
Look, you know how that came about? President's meeting with Trudeau, and Trudeau says, well, if you even out our trade relationship, then we will cease to exist as a country. At which point the president responded very logically, and that is, well, if you can't exist without cheating in trade, then you should become a state.
And we know this because Fox News' Peter Doocy reported this right after that meeting in Mar-a-Lago. So interesting, Bruce, because Trudeau came back. We didn't hear anything about this from the Canadian side. And it wasn't until American reporting on this dinner. Peter Doocy said the same thing. We have that clip, so let's play that.
And tonight we're getting some new details about that Trump-Trudeau dinner from two people who were at the table. We are told that when Trudeau told President-elect Trump that new tariffs would kill the Canadian economy, Trump joked to him that if Canada can't survive without ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau could become its governor.
So why would Trudeau give that away, right? Like, it's like you're entering a negotiation with someone who, like you said, is very unpredictable, who has the better hand, right? The Americans have much more power and control over this relationship. It's
Sure.
true that Canada has, even though we have free trade, we have a huge number of subsidies and uneven playing field, all kinds of subsidies around sort of core Canadian industries, including things like dairy and cheese and all that kind of stuff. So why would Trudeau say that? Why would Trudeau say that? Unless, I don't think that Trudeau is someone who's like thinking ahead and playing 3D chess and is like, let me get into this because the Canadian people will turn against Trump and then that'll help me in the polls. But, this idea is that Trudeau came out and said, if we actually had an even playing field for trade, Canada wouldn't exist as a country. I mean, we should be mad at Trudeau, not Trump.
Well, yes. So here's a metaphor that keeps running through my head. Canada is like a little brother. The Americans are the older brother. Canada is the little brother. And the little brother assumes that the older brother is going to look after him because that's just the nature of the thing, right? And the little brother can still get away with slagging the older brother because he's a little brother. But when they go to school together and the bullies pick on the little brother, the big brother is going to protect him and get away with insulting the big brother because he's a little brother. And the big brother is fed up with it. The big brother is saying, no, you know what? We're both adults now. You stand on your own 2 feet. And if you can't, then I'm done with you. I'm not going to step out now and protect you because I've been doing this for a long time and I'm not doing it anymore. So put up or shut up. Either this relationship becomes equalized, and of course it can never be equalized because we're not equal countries. Access to the American market is the thing that every country in the world wants. And we've had it. Largely, we've had it. And we think we're entitled to it because of who we are and where we are and our relationship with them and so on. They're fed up with this. And I don't blame them in some respects because we've been taking a lot of things for granted.
And so how do you think, let's turn back to the conservative side, because I think in some ways Pierre Poilievre is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Donald Trump is such a wedge, even on the conservative side. Half the conservatives in the country love Donald Trump, half of them hate him and don't want the Poilievre party, the Conservative Party, to come even harder and stronger than what Trudeau is saying, like with retaliatory tariffs and with anti-American sentiment and Canada First. What if you were advising Mr. Poilievre, what would you tell him to do?
Well, geez, I'm not a political strategist, so he probably shouldn't take advice from me. But if he did it the way I would like to see, I would like him to pick a lane. Like, come on, man, where do you stand on this? And I would like him to say, know what, we have problems in this country. We have to fix these problems. Trump is trolling us, and maybe we don't agree with what he's proposing, but he's got a point. And the point is we have to fix our own house, put our own house in order. I don't really hear that from anybody right now in this country. And that's a shame because that means we're not going to get anywhere. And it means that we're not going to take advantage of the opportunity, this open door that we have. I'm not saying that we have to walk through it. I'm just saying that we have to figure out what to do given the choice. And that's the kind of thing that the conservatives and the liberals and everybody else in the political realm right now is refusing to do.
I want to just bring in one more topic to this conversation, Bruce, and that is this is so ironic to me. Thousands of Canadians have signed a petition asking for the Canadian government to revoke Elon Musk's citizenship. So this comes from NDP MP Charlie Angus. He's sponsoring this e-petition saying Elon Musk is a dual citizen with Canada and the United States. His mother was born in Regina, Saskatchewan. Musk himself attended Queen's University, where you teach.
Yes.
And they are saying that he should not have the privilege of being Canadian. Now, I find this ironic because it was just a decade ago that we heard from Justin Trudeau that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and that even terrorists should get to keep their Canadian citizenship, even if they are involved in active terrorist plots against Canada, that Canadian citizenship is totally above the fray of partisan politics. And yet now you have an MP from the Liberal, from the NDP Liberal coalition, saying that we should just take people's citizenships away because we don't like them. What do you think?
Oh, this is just pathetic. This is small. This is just virtue signaling. I'm sure he's not expecting it to happen. He's just trying to, wave the flag in his own way to satisfy his supporters and people who feel the same way. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. It's sad. It's a sad idea from what has become well, I don't want to call Canada a sad little country because we are all committed and loyal and fond of our own country. We want the best for it. But the responses that this country is generating to this moment that we have are kind of pathetic and disappointing. I would like us to have a much more sophisticated conversation, an open-eyed, open-minded conversation about the position that we're in. And I just don't hear very much of it happening. Now, in some places it is happening. There's a small group of people who understand, I perceive, they understand that this country has found itself in a mess. But the numbers are still too small.
Well, certainly if you look at the polling and you see the resurgence and surge on the Liberal side, it's alarming that so many Canadians can sort of succumb to the narrative that they're being told, that America's the enemy, and that we have to wrap ourselves in the flag, and the Liberal flag, not just the Canadian flag, but the Liberal
Yes,
Party is
right.
the one that can protect us. Hopefully, there's still time, and hopefully more Canadians will come around to this idea that we're not angels, and we have an opportunity to improve our country. I don't think that joining the United States is really in the cards, but I mean the way that you lay it out, and the idea that maybe Alberta should seriously consider. I'll mention I did raise this question. I interviewed Premier Danielle Smith, Alberta Premier, and I did ask her about this specifically, and she basically just said that she understands why many Canadians would want to become Americans. I mean, specifically, I think 45% of young males age 18 to 34 say that they would take American citizenship. And she says she understands because of the economics of it. Like, it's not a matter of love of country or patriotism. It's just a matter of pure, like, where can I have the best life? And for many, that is the United States. I don't know if you caught that interview, Bruce, but did you want to comment at all on that?
Well, so I totally understand why federal politicians wouldn't want to endorse this idea, and as I say, that's not going to happen as a unit. I understand Danielle's hesitation to put her eggs in that basket. It's politically difficult to do that because an awful lot of people are not there yet, and maybe they'll never be there. Maybe it's a loser idea politically. I don't know. But I have to say that a politician in the position of Premier Smith would. I mean, just imagine this. Again, I'm blue skying, but imagine that this actually happened with Alberta, and she became the first governor of the state of Alberta. I mean, that would be pretty cool. It'd be cool for her. It'd be cool for Alberta. And so, at the same time that I understand their hesitation to jump in with both feet, I hope that in some corner of their brain they will be thinking, well, how could this occur? And I don't think, and my guess is that there won't be any official referenda on this, even in Alberta. But what I've been suggesting is, and we have history with this because of Quebec, right? We have a Supreme Court decision setting out what would be needed to start this process. We even have a federal statute setting out what would be needed, although the federal statute, is a statute only. But you'd need a referendum in Alberta with a clear question that a majority of people approved, and that would start it. It wouldn't finish it. It would start it. Start the process of negotiating what was going to happen. And that referendum is in an official sense is not going to happen anytime soon. And so what I've been saying is to Albertans, it's like, hold your own. Like, go out there and organize your own referendum. It won't be binding. It won't satisfy the requirements, but if you get a good result, it will then require the powers that be to hold an official referendum. And you got to start somewhere. And who knows where it will lead? You try not to worry about the end, and instead worry about the next step. And let's see what happens.
Well, it's very, very thought-provoking and interesting. Bruce Pardy, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and thank you for your thoughts as usual. We appreciate your time.
It's been a real pleasure, Candice. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's do it again soon. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. That's it for us today. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. Thank you, and God bless.